Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Leafs Line podcast. I'm your host, Russo. I'm joined by Evan Davis, Jared Rotenberg, and Adamo Rimoli, the familiar cast here. We got some interesting stuff to talk about today. One big topic that has encapsulated the hockey world. You should have guessed it. It's a guy in a Vancouver Canucks uniform and is not going to be in one for much longer, unless maybe he plays for them on the All-Star game. I don't know. That would be really weird. Probably not going to happen. I wonder who's going to go to the All-Star game for Vancouver. But if you haven't already read the thumbnail and the description to it, Bo Horvat is the main discussion for today. One of the kind of few Canucks that we've kind of expected to lead the team in the most recent weeks. After Boudreau got out the door, we figured a lot of other guys would follow suit. And lo and behold, their captain is the one to take the lowest of the blow and head to Long Island. I don't know what you're doing on Long Island, but he'll find some nice things. I don't know, some Long Island chowder to munch on. And probably a lot of goals to score because he's been doing a lot of that this year. What we're going to do here today, basically break down the trade, give our thoughts on it. The entire discussion is going to be based off of this big move. We haven't really seen many blockbuster moves in the NHL during this regular season, which is unusual because we usually see a couple leading to the trade deadline. They're obviously mostly reserved for the deadline. That's what it's for. But this one was a big one. And I when I first read the texts that were in the group chats, I didn't know. I just saw the only one I read. And I curse you guys for doing this. I just read Matthew Nyes a first and Kyle Dubas. And I'm like, no, we didn't do this, did we? Kyle, come on now. And I tell my dad, I'm like, Horvat to the Leafs? Like, what? No way. And then I go read the chat. I'm like, oh, wait, no, he's going to a place that I don't care about. Very relevant in the world of hockey. And maybe he'll make a difference there. So, Bo Horvat, he goes to the Islanders. He was traded yesterday evening while I was eating my dinner and almost choking on it when I saw that text. Traded for a first round pick in this year's draft. It is protected. I believe it is top 12 protected, correct, which is going to be an interesting thing to follow as the year progresses because as we all know, and as we discussed thoroughly throughout this show, this draft is one of the deepest ones we've seen in some recent time. So the first round pick protected does go Vancouver's way, and it can also go Vancouver's way if it lies, I believe, outside of the 12 picks. Yeah, outside of the 12. Anthony Beauvillier is also the kind of the main piece into that trade, but a lot of people are discussing this guy right here, a young Atu Ratu, the guy who was projected to be the next Finnish phenom, and well, he's had a bumpy start to it, and he's a young guy, so there's a lot of upside to see where he's going to bring to the table, but he's heading to Vancouver. Guys, thoughts on the deal? Let's do a quick trade grade, and then we'll make our way a little bit more into deeper analysis. Like Rimoli, you know how it works. A to C, A to D, F, if you want to even throw it out there. Give me the trade grade for you. Quick one here. A, B, C. Let's hear
it. You want both teams or what?
Oh yeah, give me both teams. Why not?
Okay. Let's start, I guess, Vancouver.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go give him A minus. Nice. I think he did well. Honestly, I think it's about as good as you were gonna get from Bo Horvat. He's having a career year. Let's remember, Bo Horvat is not a 50-goal guy. This is at most a good second line center. He just happens to be playing like an elite center. Obviously he wasn't coming back. I'm trying to not view this through the lens of you chose to keep JT Miller, but it's really hard to not do that. So yeah, I'll give them an A minus. I think they got a pretty good return. They got a first round pick, which they might not even get because the Islanders are the Islanders.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a different condition? Will that turn into a next year pick?
It'll move into a 2024. Exactly.
Yeah, unprotected.
Oh, okay. So they're getting a first. Okay, good. Yeah, okay, I'll go first. You're laughing. You get a first round pick. You get Atu Ratu, who I've seen scouts. I know he was projected to be really good, but he was
projected to be first in the draft. I remember people saying that as well. Yeah,
he hasn't been great.
He was high.
I know. I follow a lot of draft analytics. None of them like him except for one. I actually know the guy, Chase. Yeah, good guy. Every other one doesn't like him. So, I don't know. It's kind of a Magic Bean thing. Yeah, I wouldn't read it. Don't value Atu Ratu as a first round pick. He's not. And then they got what? Anthony Beauvillier. Cool. He's a guy.
Well, someone who does value them like first round picks, the GM of Vancouver Canucks, Alvin, who said, well, if you think of it this way, we just got three first round picks.
No, you did not.
That's not how that works.
You got a second round prospect. Yeah, you got a second round prospect with a second round prospect. Beauvillier was drafted 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
2015.
2015.
Stop it.
And like
No.
Ratu was like one of the final picks of the second round. Like,
Yeah, come on. Like, let's not act like
That's
this
called
is-
putting a band-aid on a really weird situation.
Yeah.
Because
And
Vancouver
I
needs
guess
band-aids right now.
yeah,
Their fan base.
exactly. I guess I understand point. I'll give you a D plus because yeah, I don't know, Lou. Your team isn't good enough. If this is the first of a couple moves, fine. I could see there's like there's something there. The Islanders are not in the Bedard sweepstakes. I don't think they're that bad, but I don't think they're great. They're mid, which is a terrible place to be. And I guess they
Absolutely.
said double down, go for it. So I'll reserve judgment, but as of right now, not looking great.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned that situation where the Islanders find themselves in. Of course, it can change with a couple extra moves, maybe even in the trade deadline. That could be a team to look out for, maybe a surprising team. But once you're in that, I guess the twilight zone, I guess you could call it, where you're not in the sweepstakes for a great draft pick, and you're also not contending for a Stanley Cup, that is a really odd place to be, especially this year, as much as it is every other year. But I want to put a pin in that because that's a big topic of discussion when you're incorporating and kind of looking at every single different angle at this trade. But Jared, give me your angle on this trade. Give me a Vancouver Canucks grade and then an Islanders grade, A, B, C, what have you. Start with the Vancouver Canucks because you got the beautiful jersey on.
Oh yeah. For starters, I'm going to start with the Vancouver Canucks, and I'm going to give them a B plus. Like obviously a lot of people out there are saying, "Oh, the Canucks should have asked for more," but honestly, I think they got a perfect kind of return for a guy that they're selling high on. As much as yes, he's 27 and he can maintain this. As looking at his current career trajectory, he's currently tied his goal total in 30 less games than he did it in last year. Like last year, he got 31 goals in 70 games. Right now, he got 31 goals in about 45 or 50. So yes, maybe he does this again, but I don't know. I've never seen him play this dominant. Chances are in the rest of his career, he will never be this dominant again. At least that's my prediction. So the fact that they're shipping him out of town and are getting a prospect, yes, obviously we don't know how good Atu Ratu's going to end up being, but he's still probably the Islanders' best prospect. So the fact that they stole him from the Islanders is a pretty good thing. And as well, the fact that they're getting a first-round pick in a great draft. And Anthony Beauvillier, yeah, he's not fantastic, but he's still a guy who you could probably pencil in for a good 15, 20 goals per year in and around just under 40 points per year. He's a roster guy that could probably slot into their second line. So I don't hate that whatsoever. And once again, I think I'm giving that a B plus. Moving over to the Islanders, yes, they got the best player in the trade, and this year it's going to be good for them. So for that reason, I'm going to give it about a C minus because yeah, this year getting Bo Horvat, you can't really get mad about that just because they're a team that's had a lot of struggles getting depth scoring. Well, you got a guy who's absolutely scoring the lights out, but long term, this thing's going to absolutely blow up in their face, and I really don't know what they're doing. I don't know why they were a team that was willing to give up this much for a player like Bo Horvat that very easily could end up leaving in the offseason. So I think it's a very questionable move from Lou Lamoriello. For this year, it's all right. It could help them get them into the playoffs, and they're a team that once they get into the playoffs, they've proven that they can end up going deep. But I don't really know what they were doing long term with this. I don't think this was a well thought out deal from Lou Lamoriello, and I wouldn't be shocked if this blows up in their face.
And it's strange that we see a deal not being as thought out from an Islanders perspective, just because they are really rare to pull the trigger on a big piece. When was the last time we saw a really big name, a nice, sexy name on the market come to the New York Islanders? It's been, I don't have one off the top of my head, maybe remind me, but I haven't seen really that many great players that are in the rumor mill very more often than not actually end up in a beautiful fisherman's jersey when they wear them. So it's going to be interesting how that story plays out. Evan Davis, give me a grade for the Vancouver Canucks and the Islanders. Round off the panel here, and then we'll get a little bit deeper into both the New York Islanders perspective, Lou Lamoriello's stake, and I mean, Adamo, you texted this in our group chat a couple days ago, potential hot seat for Lou. Maybe this was a move to kind of put a Band-Aid on that, if you will, or maybe this is going to be his thing that he exits out with, and this is going to be the one that sends him to dismay. But regardless, we'll talk about that in just a bit. Evan, grade for the Vancouver Canucks and the New York Islanders.
Yeah, I'll give the Canucks an A. I think we have to wait and see just what this first round pick ends up being to do like a full trade grade. Just because, with as we've mentioned so many times, this draft is just so deep that I mean they could find a top line guy even in the 15th pick or whenever this pick is that the New York Islanders will give up, or if it's next year, the 2024 draft is still really nice. Uh, from the Islanders' perspective, I seriously don't understand why they were so bent over backwards to get Bo Horvat on this team. When you look at their prospect ranking heading into the season, it was the 27th ranked uh, prospect pool. So it really isn't that notable. And, I took time to look at like who's on the Bridgeport Islanders, their AHL team, and it's a lot of 26 and 28-year-olds. So it's not like any of these guys on Bridgeport are really going to be in the NHL making an impact if they're still finding ice time in Bridgeport. And with Lou, like he loves trading first round picks and getting horrible returns. I seriously like you look at the years that he's traded a first, and it's literally every year. Like he just thinks that like first round picks don't mean anything. Like he traded one for Zach Parise and Travis Zajac when they were just like god awful. I don't understand what Lou Lamoriello is doing. Yeah, I get the New York Islanders can be a sneaky team once the playoffs start, and even if they do win a round, it's not like the second round is going to treat them any nicer. I don't even see them winning a playoff game if they eventually do make the playoffs. I think either Boston or Carolina will just sweep them. Uh, yeah, really confusing. If you're Vancouver, you weren't going to be able to trade JT Miller just because of the contract. So I think this was kind of like your next best thing just because you get an expiring. And honestly, the return is a lot more than I would have expected just because it is an expiring deal. So you got to hope the Islanders are going to re sign Bo Horvat to a contract extension. I highly doubt it just because they're so cap fucked that like they can't afford Bo Horvat, just with Semyon Barmalov's contract being the one thing that pops up in my head. And they got Sorokin, they're going to need to pay hefty because he's one of the top 5 goalies in the NHL.
There's a lot on the books.
I don't know. Yeah, the one thing that
there's a lot coming its way.
Yeah, and let's just one like you traded a first rounder for Alexander Romanov. Like really? I mean, like Lou Lamoriello, I think I agree with Adamo. Like he's on the hot seat. Like if the Islanders don't make the playoffs, I don't see a way that you could convince a fan base that this is a GM that's going to help you not only just make it to the playoffs, but even like make a run. Like we saw them against Tampa go to Game 7, and we haven't really seen much of them since.
Mm-hmm. And let's take a look at the Islanders currently where they stand. They're 3-5-2 in their last 10, currently sit 2 points out of a wild card spot. And the one thing that's a little bit concerning, not too concerning because we're kind of reaching the midway point of the season, a little bit past it actually, is the fact that they've played the most games in the NHL, which means these points, and there's a lot of room. We were talking about a couple of weeks ago with the Kings compared to, we were comparing to them some,
the Oilers, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. The Oilers. We're comparing the Kings to the Oilers just because of how playoff structures working at that point in time. The games do matter. The amount of games these guys have played. In the long run, it does play a big part of where you're going to finish in the standings. And in the case of this trade and the picks and how it's involved, finishing in the standings is kind of like the big deal here. If you want to, aside from Bo Horvat, the biggest asset in this trade, I'd say, is likely that first round pick. If it shapes out to be this year, it's huge for the Vancouver Canucks. If it doesn't, it kind of makes your view on the trade a little bit different. But let's point at the pawns here in this game that have been moved around the chessboard of the NHL. Let's talk about Anthony Beauvillier. His best years are ahead of him. I mean, his career high of 39 points. He struggled with the Islanders ever since he kind of got there in 2015. He's kind of failed to establish himself very specifically in their top 6 role. So I think at 25 years old, this guy's going to have a really good facet and a really good ability to work his way into a core that I think personally is going to start to be getting a little bit more fresher. I remember a couple of days ago, Vancouver management was talking about Kuzmenko kind of being a part of their core. That's a young player that you can really ride with. But he also, in the same breath, said Hughes and Pettersson is also in that same group. So it's kind of a weird message. I do believe the Vancouver Canucks are going to get a little bit of a younger core in the near future. And I think Beauvillier can kind of benefit from that and support that. And you got Horvat, this guy here. He's having a career year. I think all you guys said in your points and your great analysis of both teams. He is someone who it might not be sustainable. And if you want to say it isn't, I think that's the easier argument to make because we just haven't seen him prove it. Adamo, he is absolutely a second line center. And I don't think he's really proven, other than the fact that he scored 31 goals this year in any other facet of his game. He's just a second line center. And then I think he's someone that we've learned this year with all the turmoil going with the Vancouver Canucks organization. He's capable of turning something out of nothing. And this is perfect for the Islanders in a situation where they don't have much. Like if you want to go look at their roster top to bottom, not a lot of great names. There's a lot of guys who they've had in the past and have tried to work out and they just kind of feel like they're running in circles a little bit and trying to play with what they got. Bo Horvat can benefit this team that really wants to make something out of nothing and work their way up the standings. Maybe we see that kind of combined with some trade deadline moves. So this could really be a good something to work out for Bo Horvat and the New York Islanders this year. But I don't know, like, what are you guys really looking out for with this trade? What's the biggest piece that is going to make you look at it differently in the near future? Is it reliant on how Bo Horvat plays in New York? Is it reliant if he even signs back with New York? Or is it reliant on how the guys in Vancouver fare? And is this the right return? Like, what's kind of the big side that you're looking forward to as this year progresses and as next year progresses as well? What's the biggest storyline? Dom, I'll throw it to you. What's something that after this trade was made yesterday, you're going to have your eye on and say, when we reapproach this discussion about Bo Horvat and this trade that they made, a blockbuster deal that we haven't really seen very well in the 2022-23 season, what's going to be something that catches your eye and say, I maybe should have rethought of this a little differently now that I saw how it played out?
I think that'll be Bo Horvat for sure. He's, as of right now, the best player in the deal. Beauvillier, there's nothing really there. I don't think Beauvillier is going to be a good player. He's never had many points. Analytically, not great. It screams fresh start. I think he was a first round pick, right? Yeah. Nothing there. That's kind of a project. If it works, yay. If it doesn't, it wasn't going to anyways. The first round pick, again, probably not, because you're picking from 13 to 20, or next year you're picking. If it's 2024 first overall pick, you're laughing. If it's anywhere in the top 5, you're laughing, which it very well could be. But I think the X factor in this trade is Bo Horvat, because I think he kind of fits that Islanders mold of hockey, where he's always been decent defensively. He's never been a Selke winner, but he's always been fine defensively. He's able to score goals, which the Islanders can't do. So let's not act like he's not on a heater this year. This heater could last the entire season, because he has shown that he's a great player. It also gives you a lot more versatility. You can move Brock Nelson to the wing. You can imagine Barzal and Horvat on the line. I think it'd be really good together. So it's a great, like, maybe I'm talking myself into this from the Islanders side. I feel like I'm slowly talking myself.
But the
into
thing, like, that's the thing. There's an expiration date in La La Land here in Long Island, right? Like, depending on what they do, right? Like, this could be something that they extend Horvat, and he's a guy who's sustainable, and it's going to be a great win for the organization. But it can also, like Jared pointed out when he was talking, it can just blow up in their face spectacularly, right? Like, and that's the gamble you make with a rental.
That's exactly and let's bring it back to the Leafline podcast. They go and get Meyer. I'm not gonna lie. I'm ready to move Knies in a first and like Kerfoot or whatever for Timo, even if it's a year. At some point, you gotta go for it. Matthew Knies is probably tops out as a middle 6 winger. Like, and if he becomes a first line center, cool.
But then you got Timo Meyer.
You got Timo Meyer. Even if you get 30 games of Timo Meyer and he brings you far, which he probably will, unless the Leaf curse is that strong. Like, I don't. Man, I'm slowly talking myself into it from the Oilers' point of view.
The Islanders.
The Islanders. They're not bad enough to suck and be into the Bedard sweepstakes, so you might as well go for it. The Islanders are one of those teams where you say, "Oh, if they get in, watch out for them." Well, Horvat is go for it.
Yeah, like, the only argument I'd have against that is just, and I've talked to my dad a lot about this. Like, if you're gonna suck, then just suck. Like, there's no point. And that was the issue with the Kings for a while. It was like they were not bad enough to be like in the Bedard sweepstakes, like top 5, but they also weren't good enough to be a playoff contender and make noise. So they would always screw themselves with getting like the 14th, 15th pick. Like, from the Islanders' standpoint, this doesn't make sense to me, just because you either want to be terrible or really good. And when you're not even in the playoff hunt right now, like, this just doesn't make sense to go. Like, this is a trade that's a team like Boston or Carolina would make, not a team like New York, who it just didn't make sense. And
see, I counter that with, I think they are in the playoff hunt. They're a couple points out of the playoff. Let's call it 6 points out of the playoffs.
Yeah, But even if so, like,
They're
even
in
if they
there.
make it to the first round, and like let's say they lose in the first round hypothetically, because like I just don't think they're better than Boston or Carolina. Even if they take it 6 or 7 games, like I
Yeah.
just feel like one of those teams is going to beat them in the end. Then you're finding yourself with the pick in like 18 or 19 or 20, whatever that is, and your prospect pool already isn't good enough. Like, and don't get me wrong, like even the top 5 picks don't pan out. Like we've seen top 5 picks not pan out before, but I think from their standpoint, it's like you either think you're going to win the Stanley Cup or you just are going to suck and rebuild, and that's the whole thing that we've been talking with Vancouver about. Is no, everyone's afraid of a rebuild, but it just sometimes it works out for the best.
Yeah. The only thing is, I think they're too far gone out of the Bedard sweepstakes. Like, they'd have to lose every damn game
Yeah.
for the rest of the season and
No, but
they have a good enough roster to not lose every game. That's the issue. Like, they're stuck in mediocrity and they're choosing to say, hey, if we get there, who knows, right? I still think
Yeah,
it might be a little bit of an overpay, but sometimes you got to overpay for
it's
stars.
just an interesting move. It was just interesting to see them go for him.
Jared, you want to comment on a little bit, because we're talking about the Islanders' perspective and how their playoff picture may be shaping out to be. I kind of get the hint that this first round pick that they're giving away might act as some motivation. Hey, we don't want to give these guys, we want this to be stay protected. We don't want to give these guys that pick in this draft. We're going to have a good season the rest of the way. That's kind of how I look at it. But when you look at Vancouver's perspective, no direction. We were talking about it before we hopped on the show. No direction with this team. Sure, this Horvat deal might be a signifier as to which way they want to go. Do they want to go younger? Do they want to start a little bit more of a rebuild? But these guys have time and time again from management and any other angle in that regards has said, no, we want to just retool. The fans don't know what direction this team is. They don't know which is up or down. Like, I was wondering if you can comment a little bit on that, because I think that's one of the more fascinating aspects of the Vancouver side of things, is that guys are coming in there and it's still a massive retooling that we're seeing instead of what the fans, I think, if you ask a Vancouver fan, they'd admit that they want a full-on rebuild. As Leaf fans, we knew the rebuild was coming. We embraced it, and that's what was there. The fans don't want the rebuild to come. It's the year to have a rebuild to come, and it's just not. So, like, what do you make of this? Because I think this trade just kind of reenacts where the Vancouver Canucks still stand and how they're still trying to retool at a younger pace, but still trying to retool.
Well, what I'll start with in saying is that the fact that the GM is still saying, "Oh, I want to retool and not rebuild," that is a major problem. But I don't hate this return in regards to them trying to go into a younger away. The fact that they got Atu Ratu, which yes, he's still a question mark, and we don't know how he's going to pan out. But the fact that they are going with a kid that will be a part of the rebuild, and they stole, I'd argue, the best prospect that the Islanders have, that was probably a big part of the negotiation process, where they basically said, we are taking your best prospect if we're going to give you our captain. And that to me is a signifier that, yes, as much as they don't want to admit and use the word rebuild, they are moving towards a younger mindset, and they are kind of starting to think that this thing isn't going to work and we're going to need some young pieces to move towards a rebuild. And the fact that they got a first round pick as well, that shows that they are starting to think about kind of the younger way of doing things and are trying to think that we need some pieces that are going to be part of our core moving forwards. And even the fact that they got Beauvillier, that to me, it's questionable because, yeah, they're definitely getting that player with the hope that, oh, we're going to throw this guy in our top 6 and maybe playing with JT Miller, he can pan out. But even the fact that he still has some potential as an offensive-minded winger that has a little bit of speed and skill, I don't hate the fact that they're adding these guys and at least they're building on what they're already good at, which is the offensive side of things. Yes, their defense still sucks, but they're kind of building on, if they know if they're going to turn this ship around, it's going to be in getting guys with offensive potential and in getting prospects. And I don't hate the fact that that's what they're doing. Again, they need to admit that they need a rebuild because everyone in the hockey world knows that's what they need to do. But at the very least, the fact that they're getting guys with potential, guys that are prospects and first round picks, I think without admitting to the rebuild, they're kind of signifying in their moves that a rebuild is the way that the Canucks are moving.
And what's the bad thing about in 2023, admitting the word tank and rebuild have never sounded more beautifully and went together more beautifully in the last 4 or 5 years. Like these are things that should be embraced. They're once in a generation. That's hence why generational talent is the word that we use. These are the years where if you're close to tanking, like you guys have all said, you got to tank. You
Do
got to
it.
rebuild.
Yeah.
Why do you have to call it a retool? If anything, call it a youthful retool. Make it more specific. That's the one
Honestly,
thing that the fans don't understand.
I don't think a retool. I know a retool doesn't exist. There's no such thing as a retool. It's not real. It's just to please ownership that we're not tanking. We're not tanking. No, you're rebuilding. Okay, with the tool build. What's the difference? It's a rebuild. They're rebuilding. Expect Besser gone. Expect Pedersen probably. It's so obvious he doesn't want to be there. It's so
I
obvious.
agree.
It's so obvious that he's gonna be the next, maybe 2 years from now, maybe even next year, where we start to hear rumblings, if you will. He's gone. Who else? Kuzmenko. What are you doing with Kuzmenko? Why didn't you resign him? You had
So
Yeah.
go on.
I was just gonna say you have this guy at 950. What are you doing? Just trade him. Here, would you rather a first round pick or a guy who's gonna take us further away from Bedard?
Well, Jared made a good point about Kuzmenko. Like,
Yeah, go for it.
So what I was gonna say is just the fact that they are locking him in for the next few years at a reasonable amount, like $5.5 million, isn't crazy.
That's cool. No, it's a good
move.
contract if it wasn't the Canucks, is what I'm saying.
I agree with that. But what I was gonna say is I think the fact that they locked him in, yes, it's terrible if their goal is for him to stay there for all of those years. But and I'm giving a lot of benefit of the doubt to Canucks management that isn't warranted, I'll admit that. But if this is what they have in mind, that they're locking him in to make it an easy player to trade, I don't hate it, because if on the other end of things, if they were to have not signed him to this extension, he's currently scoring at a ridiculous pace. And if he were to have gone to the market after this year with a phenomenal season that, as of his current pace, he could end up scoring 70, 80 points, then a team will have to lock him in at a lot more than $5.5 million. So the fact that they're locking him in at a reasonable amount, I think it gives them a little bit, hey, rather than you having to negotiate with this kid that might come off of over a point per game pace, we're doing the job for you and locking him in at $5 million, which, with the cap going up especially, is an easy. I don't think that's hard for a team to acquire $5 million. I don't think it takes.
No,
much
it's a good
effort.
contract. It's a good contract. That's actually a good point. I'd be curious to see if that happens. I just can't get over the fact that Kuzmenko is going to help you. You don't want to be good. This is the year you want to suck, and you just re-signed your point of game player when he was going to get you a good return anyways. Like he's making 950.
mhm.
Shit, that's a guy I wanted the Leafs to target. Personal bias aside, because me and Jared,
Yeah.
He's
still on my
unbelievable.
fantasy
He's so
team.
good.
Oh god,
Same.
yo,
He's unbelievable.
fun little thing about him. I did some research on him because I'm like, Jared, I don't know if you've noticed this too, but Kuzmenko will go like 5 games without a single point, and I'll be like, man, this guy kind of sucks. And then he goes and gets like 4 points, and another 5, 5 games, and then another 3. Do you notice that too?
He's super inconsistent, but when he's on, he's so
He's
good.
so on. But God, he'll go on like 4 games where like he'll have like maybe 3 shots on goal. I'm like, dude. But regardless, this is besides the point. That's a guy at 950 that's like a point a game that, any team can take 950. Any team.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
No, it's interesting to look at. And I mean, the Vancouver Canucks, at some point, whether they like to admit it now or later down the road, and much later down the road, it's kind of looking it to be, they're going to have to commit to the rebuild, or kind of what we learned today, whatever else is they're thinking of. A retool is what they claim it as, but whatever they think that may be, it's not a rebuild. And if it's not a rebuild, that's an issue, especially when you're a team not fighting for a contending spot in the playoffs, not even close to the playoff picture, and can very well just sneak your way into the Bedard sweepstakes and end up winning it, right? So those are some important storylines that I think we kind of wrapped up a lot of things on this on the show. It's the Bedard sweepstakes play a big role in how these two teams shape up. At the same time, too, where these guys finish in the standings is going to shape up how we view this trade in the near future. And that these guys, the guys who've been moved from the Islanders, obviously, to the Canucks and back and forth, they're impactful guys that will be able to fit into these lineups pretty easily. The change of scenery is going to suit these guys very nicely. So I think that's all you gotta know about this Bo Horvat, Beauvillier, Ratu, and a conditional first round pick deal. It's a blockbuster. It's one that have your eye on in the near future. And there's one team that wants to go up and one team that doesn't know which way up or down is. So again, going to be entertaining one to watch in the later months as the trade deadline approaches and as the playoff picture starts to shape out too. But regardless, I think that's all we got for today. Thank you guys for joining us so much. I am your host, Mira Russo, Evan Davis, Jared Rotenberg, and Adam Rimoli. This has been a fun episode. I was talking about it pretty highly. I knew this Horvat episode was going to be a pretty interesting one because there's just so many layers to unravel, and lo and behold, that's what we found here today. But thank you guys for tuning in. Tune into our next episodes when they come out. Again, we're kind of getting pretty busy with school. So whenever we get some free time like we did this week, we'll pop on, even if there is a big blockbuster trade coming. Maybe it's one in another blue and white uniform. These Toronto Maple Leafs, they might be making a big splash in the upcoming months. So stick around for that. We'll have a couple of games. But again, thank you so much for joining. Take care, and see you guys later.